You're listening to New Talk on WNSR, New School Radio.
Julie Menin is a civic leader in New York City and television news commentator who has appeared on CNN, MSNBC, and the Fox News Channel, and the list goes on and on. She began her career in Manhattan as a successful restaurant owner before dedicating her life to public service. Ms. Menin is currently the chairperson of New York City's Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan. As chair of CB1, Ms. Menin has worked on numerous issues and has spearheaded a successful campaign to build 2 new schools in her district, including New York's first green school. Ms. Menin is the founder and former president of Wall Street Uprising, a not-for-profit organization with 30,000 members dedicated to revitalizing Lower Manhattan in the wake of the events of September 11th. The day after the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I spoke with Julie Menin about where she was on that day 10 years ago and how it forever changed Lower Manhattan. I would like to welcome Julie Menin to WNSR New School Radio. Since today is the day after the 10th anniversary of 9/11, where were you 10 years ago yesterday, and can you share any thoughts on...
Well, absolutely. I was in the building where my restaurant was located. I opened up the restaurant to rescue workers and to others who needed food. In the building that we were in, we had hundreds of people pour into the lobby of the building because really no one knew what was going on. There was a grayish soot that covered and permeated every single pore and crevice. People were just covered in this white, grayish ash. It was very difficult to breathe. We put women and children and seniors, women who are pregnant, let me clarify, women who are pregnant and children and seniors in a room sort of away from a lot of the soot and debris, and we put wet cloths under all of the doors and windows. And it was obviously a very difficult time. People weren't sure at the time if the New York Stock Exchange was going to be the next target, and we were right across the street. So it was very unclear. People weren't sure if they should go out into the street, if it was safer to stay in the building. And I stayed in that building for several days after 9/11. Most of the neighborhood in that area had been evacuated. Our building was not. This was the building that I lived in because NYPD at the time had it listed as an office building and was not aware that there were over 345 apartments in there. So police officers came by a couple days later and ordered that we had to evacuate because the building next to us was unstable and might come down. So unfortunately, we had to leave the neighborhood, and we left for about 2 or 3 days. And then as soon as they lifted the evacuation order, we were some of the first people to come back. I'll never forget taking the subway back to Bowling Green and bringing our luggage back in and coming back to our neighborhood. And I reopened my business on Monday, September 17th, which was the same day that the New York Stock Exchange reopened.
That's a perfect segue into my next line of questioning, which is the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan. At one particular point in time, Lower Manhattan was a place that not a lot of people wanted to live. And then September 11th happened, and now people are moving there. It's a booming environment. What do you think can be attributed to that growth?
Well, one of the major reasons is that the federal government, the city, state, and federal government stepped in with money for the redevelopment of Lower Manhattan. I sit on the board of the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, and the LFEC, about a year after 9/11, gave residential grants for people to stay in their apartments downtown, and perhaps more importantly, to move downtown. So we are now the fastest growing residential neighborhood in the city. We have 30,000 additional residents that have moved into Community Board 1 since 9/11. We're also the 4th largest commercial business district in the country, and now that the memorial is open today, we will have between 5 and 7 million visitors come annually. And I think it's really a great testament to the perseverance of our neighborhood. We're the only community that's been attacked twice by terrorists in the whole country, and we stayed to rebuild our neighborhood. And I have to tell you, where a lot of people counted us down and that. The people will never live downtown, or they're not going to want to work downtown, and they're certainly not going to want to visit downtown. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yes. Take me into the future for Lower Manhattan. What do you see, or would you like to see happening in terms of the future revitalization going 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think the residential growth will continue. I think we've seen a doubling of the population in Lower Manhattan in the last 5 years, and our population is set to double again in the next 10 years. We've also built 2 new public schools. Community Board 1 has made it a top priority to build new public schools. We built 2 new public schools in the last couple of years, and we're about to build our 3rd new public school. And so I think you're going to continue to see many young families move into the lower Manhattan neighborhood because of the schools, because of the parks, because of the access to the waterfront, and also because of the fact that we're a community of survivors. We're a very close-knit community downtown, and I think people want to be a part of that.
Well, I have to tell you, Miss Menin, I don't live in Lower Manhattan, but after listening to you talk about it, I want to move there. You're such a...
Please come down and visit us. I really have to say that for people who haven't been downtown in a while, I think what they'll see will really surprise them. Going to the memorial, first of all, is spectacular. These waterfalls really do encapsulate these voids that were created by the loss of the Twin Towers. And when you hear the noise of the waterfalls, when you see the sheer volume of the footprint of the Twin Towers, it really is an inspiring sight. And I hope that the family members, New Yorkers, and people all across the country will think it is a fitting tribute. Our jury spent over 2 years going through 5,201 design submissions to select this design. And I think it really is a very elegant and simple and beautiful design.
Yes, I want you, if you can, for a second, to look back on your time spent on Community Board 1. What has been some of the highs and what has been some of the lows?
Well, there have been many highs and lows. I mean, certainly to me, the biggest high was creating the new schools. There's no more important thing that we can do in city government than creating the future for the next generation of children. That is our singular purpose. And so that is perhaps our proudest moment. Some of the lows have been certainly things surrounding the World Trade Center site. It's been a very, very difficult time. We were told by the federal government that the air was safe to breathe. Now we have hundreds of residents who are sick with cancer as a result, feeding the hundreds and hundreds of first responders who have become sick because they did their call, which was to come to Ground Zero to help thousands of people and see them sick. Some of them have died. That to me is such a travesty. It's unconscionable. And that, unfortunately, has seriously been the lows.
Yes, very important points. I want to ask you, who are some of your political role models? Who do you look up to?
Oh, well, there's so many. I mean, I tend to obviously look up to women political role models because we have a dearth of women in elected office. I sit on the board of the Women's Campaign Forum, and the United States is basically 87th in the world in terms of women in elected office. Obviously, someone like Eleanor Roosevelt, who helped to really pave the way for women to be in elected office, for women to have a voice in public service. She's a role model for us all.
Yes, and to your political future, are you contemplating a run for a higher political office?
Well, I definitely believe in public service, and I do believe that we need to have more women involved in public service. I certainly plan on continuing public service. What capacity that will be in remains to be seen, but I definitely plan on continuing in public service. I think it's a very noble and important thing to do.
Well, I tell you what, if you ever do run for a higher office, I'll be one of your first volunteers on board.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. That's so kind of you.
This is actually something that I think makes for a very good interview because I know that we've been trying to do something for a long time now, and it's so fitting that we've been able to communicate now the day after the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and I think this interview makes for a very good tribute.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
This is Roy Paul for WNSR New School Radio.